Senator Franken.
Thank you, Senator Feinstein. Good to see you, Mr. Director. I'm going to kind of pick up where I think Sheldon Senator Whitehouse was going. Are you familiar with a report called the Kremlin Playbook?
No.
Okay. This is an expert report that exhaustively documents Russia's past efforts to undermine European democracies. According to the report, Russia is known to cultivate close ties with business and political leaders in target countries. This is stuff you acknowledged to Senator Whitehouse that you knew happened. The report explains that, quote, Russia has cultivated an opaque network of patronage across the region that it uses to influence and direct decision-making. In other words, Russia has a strategy of creating the conditions that give rise to corruption, then exploiting that corruption to its own benefit. In the intelligence community's unclassified assessment of the Russian campaign to influence the American election, our nation's intelligence agencies write, quote, Putin has had many positive experiences working with Western political leaders whose business interests made them more disposed to deal with Russia. That seems to jibe with your understanding of what Russia has done.
Correct.
Now, in that same assessment, the FBI, the CIA, and the NSA all concluded that Russia did, in fact, interfere in the 2016 election in order to, quote, help President-elect Trump's election chances, when possible, by discrediting Secretary Clinton. And the agencies concluded that the Russians had a clear preference for President Trump. What is your assessment of why the Russian government had a clear preference for President Trump?
The intelligence community's assessment had a couple of parts with respect to that. One is he wasn't Hillary Clinton, who Putin hated and wanted to harm in any possible way. And so he was their opponent, so necessarily they supported him. And then also this second notion that the intelligence community assessed that Putin believed he would be more able to make deals, reach agreements with someone with a business background than with someone who had grown up in more of a government environment.
Okay, well, I'm curious about just how closely Russia followed the Kremlin playbook when it meddled in our democracy, specifically whether the Russians had a preference for President Trump because he had already been ensnared in their web of patronage. Web of patronage is a quote from the report. Is it possible that in the Russians' view, Trump's business interests would make him more amenable to cooperating with them, quote, more disposed to deal with Russia, as the IC report says?
That was not the basis for the IC's assessment.
Okay, well, I just said, is it possible?
I see.
You don't want to speculate.
Yeah, because possible questions are hard for me to answer.
Yeah. Well, in order for us to know for certain whether President Trump would be vulnerable to that type of exploitation, we would have to understand his financial situation. We'd have to know whether or not he has money tied up in Russia or obligations to Russian entities. Do you agree?
That you would need to understand that to evaluate that question?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, it seems to me that there's reason to believe that such connections exist. For example, the president's son, Donald Trump Jr., told real estate developers in 2008 that, quote, Russians make up a pretty disproportionate cross-section of a lot of our assets. He said, quote, we see a lot of money pouring in from Russia. This is a report on the family business. In 2013, President Trump held a Miss Universe pageant in Moscow, and the pageant was financed by a Russian billionaire who was close to Putin. And President Trump sold a Palm Beach mansion to a Russian oligarch for $95 million in 2008. That's $54 million more than he paid for it just 4 years prior. Those are three financial ties that we know of, and they're big ones, Director Comey, the Russians have a history of using financial investments to gain leverage over influential people and then later calling in favors. We know that. We know that the Russians interfered in our election, and they did it to benefit President Trump. The intelligence agencies confirmed that. But what I want to know is why they favored President Trump. And it seems to me that in order to answer that question, any investigation into whether the Trump campaign or Trump operation colluded with Russian operatives would require a full appreciation of the president's financial dealings. Director Comey, would President Trump's tax returns be material to such an investigation?
That's not something, Senator, I'm going to answer.
Does the investigation have access to President Trump's tax returns?
I have to give you the same answer. Again, I hope people don't overinterpret my answers, but I just don't want to start talking about anything, what we're looking at and how.
Director Comey, we continue to learn about ties between Russia and former members of the president's campaign and current senior members of his administration. Jeff Sessions, Attorney General, and former campaign advisor Carter Page, former campaign advisor Paul Manafort, former campaign manager Paul Manafort. Also, he was chief strategist Rex Tillerson, Secretary of State Roger Stone, political mentor and former campaign advisor Michael Flynn, former national security advisor Jared Kushner, White House senior advisor and son-in-law. Now, we don't even know if this list is exhaustive, but I think you might see where I'm going, and these connections appear against a backdrop of proven Russian interference in the election, interference that the intelligence community has concluded was designed to favor President Trump. I know I'm hitting my time, but let me ask one question. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. From an investigative standpoint, is the sheer number of connections unusual or significant? What about each individual's proximity to the president? Is it unusual for individuals in these important roles to have so many unexpected and often undisclosed ties to a foreign power?
I have to give you the same answer. That's not something I can comment on.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.